Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Meanwhile Here on Earth. This program features in-depth conversations with the leading names in the subjects of UFOs, abductees, the paranormal, panel discussions, and the very best and brightest of the next generation of writers and researchers. Meanwhile Here on Earth, the show breaking new ground in alternative talk with your intrepid host, veteran investigative writer and researcher, Peter Robbins.
And welcome back to the radio show Meanwhile Here on Earth on KUNX Digital Broadcasting with me, your host, Peter Robbins. It is in real time, late August of 2025, and my next assignment in my chosen field is the Exeter, New Hampshire UFO Festival and Conference coming up this weekend, Labor Day weekend. It's one that I have a particular attachment to for a number of reasons. And this show tonight is dedicated to it in part because this is the 10th anniversary of this great conference and the 60th anniversary of a UFO event called the Incident at Exeter, which happened in 1965 and remains one of the best documented UFO sightings, really, that we have in the then, and particularly small conservative town of Exeter, New Hampshire. It occurred. The major witnesses were serving police officers, and with that culture, all the more back then, the idea of supporting the idea of a landed flying saucer or any such thing in your community could cost you your badge and your career. Nonetheless, they stood their ground. And most important, extremely important, was that the investigative writer who covered the story and ultimately wrote the definitive book on it was a man named John G. Fuller. The book is appropriately titled Incident at Exeter, which I'm rereading right now, and just speaking off camera before to Valerie Lofaso, one of our guests, just both of us incredibly re-impressed with this great case and this great writer. Anyway, first half of the show, it will be myself and Valerie and Mike Stevens, who will also be co-producing this show. Mike is a speaker in the series for Exeter and is the Granite Sky founder. Mike is a New Hampshire native, born and bred. He is a seasoned paranormal researcher and investigator and has worked to change the stigma surrounding the abduction phenomena. This by promoting public awareness of the subject and encouraging and supporting other experiencers. He was the initiating force behind the New Hampshire historical marker for Betty and Barney Hill's UFO encounter and been interviewed in the past by newspapers, television, and radio about his involvement in the paranormal and UFO communities, locally as well as internationally. Mike has become a trusted source for New Hampshire's UFO history. Valerie Lofaso has deep roots in the New Hampshire community, having grown up in Derry and now residing in the Seacoast area. She is a multifaceted professional serving as an empathic medium, paranormal investigator, Reiki master, and the author of the Tangled Web of Friends series, The Vital Empath. Valerie was also the co-founder of the KRI Center for Consciousness Studies in Stratham, which remains a testament to her enduring dedication to spiritual exploration. She continues her work with the Seacoast Paranormal Research Group, staying active in the field of paranormal investigation. In addition to her professional expertise, Valerie is an experiencer with a lifetime of UFO and ET encounters that began in childhood. Valerie, perfect, right? Mike, Valerie, welcome to Meanwhile Here on Earth, and welcome back.
Thanks for having us, Peter.
Thank you, Peter. It's
Wow,
good to be here.
a perfect conjugation of your names, really. It's great to see you both and to know that we'll actually be seeing each other in full three-dimensional corporeal form in a matter of days. I know that you guys have been with this event from the moment I became aware of it through our good friend Dean Merchant. And I wanted to know from your points of view about how this thing has kind of grown with you and your first thoughts about it and what you've observed about it and what makes it different than really any other UFO event that we've ever engaged in. And Valerie, would you go first?
Sure, yeah. My involvement with the festival is really due in 100% part due to Mike, who's here with us. He got involved and encouraged the people that he knew from the KRI Center to get involved in it. And the first time I went, I was shocked at what a huge event it is, how people of all walks of life come out. One of my high school teachers shows up every year for it. He was known as the cosmic historian, so I should have known. But just people from all over the place come for this, and they're all different kinds of people, and they're kind and they're open-minded, and they're looking for guidance. They're looking for education. They're looking for people to talk to about this amazing subject that can be very difficult to talk about. And it blew my mind from the beginning at what an amazing event it is. And the fact that all of the proceeds go to children's charities through the Kiwanis Club, just makes it even better.
Yeah, that's above our operating expenses, but and I think I'm allowed to say that last year we raised something like $35,000 for these services, which ain't nothing. There is no other UFO or paranormal event working with any of the wonderful international fraternal organizations to bring the presence of the UFO research world to this kind of fundraising. Mike, how did you first get involved? Was it through Dean?
I'm not sure I was aware Dean even ran it at first, or the first couple of years before the Kiwanis took it over. But I'd always heard of it, and it was Labor Day weekend. I like to go camping, so I was like, all right, one of these years I'm going to check it out. And then, so we finally got a hold of the Kiwanis, said, hey, we'd like to help any way we can. And then when we met the Kiwanis and saw what a small staff pulls off this major operation, we said, we will do anything to help you. So the first year me and Val got involved was the 50th anniversary. So because we were there to help support them and stuff, that's the first year they decided to make it a 2-day conference instead of just a 1-day conference. From there, it's grown. I mean, we've added the trolley rides where you go out to the actual site. When this first started, businesses would close down in downtown Exeter on Labor Day weekend because they would rather lose money than be associated with this. And if you look at the sponsorship list now, how downtown decorates, it's just come full circle.
You bring up a really important point, and I've been fortunate enough to observe it in a number of situations. By the first time I went to Roswell, which was certainly after the 50th anniversary, the city had already completely, reconfigured itself as a tourist destination with the conservative population behind it, feeling that the world was laughing at them. Watching the McMinnville UFO Festival and Conference grow really from about the second year, where they had maybe 3 speakers, to what it is now, an absolute juggernaut in the Northeast, which has an impact on the earnings of that particular, pencil compass line around the area every May. What we've seen is, money talks, and sometimes the intellect follows. more and more, think about the arc of what's been going on in Washington and the destigmatizing of the UFO, UAP, associative reality to your life. If you want to talk about it, it's not going to endanger your career. But we have seen a complete turnaround to literally every merchant, within sight and beyond, getting into the spirit of it. I think also the fact that this is a subject that has worked its way so deeply into Western popular culture, even in literature and God knows in films, in children's entertainment, that in kind of celebrating it is a way of looking it in the face, not taking it too seriously, or yourself as well. And I think creating a beginning idea for an education about kids in the subject, coupled with having a good time. And at the same time, having the great conference going on in the hall there. It's like a sociological experiment in a way. The population, like you say, with the surrounding people who come in, are now dedicated. We recognize a lot of the same faces in the audience every year. And like you say, it's everything, I'm sure, from professors to factory workers who know their stuff. They've been coming, they read the books. Friendships are made between us and them, between them and them. The venue, well, the idea of working in a space where Abraham Lincoln did ain't no bad thing. And I wonder, again, whether or not the impact of this festival will continue to grow. I think it will because of the tremendous interest in the subject. Valerie, can you tell us a bit about the talk you'll be doing?
Absolutely. I'll pull up my notes. I've titled it The Exeter Incident, Seacoast Life in 1965, How to Be a Good Witness and Why They Still Visit. Covering several important topics in one talk, but they are all interconnected. Because the incident that happened to Muscarello in 65 was so huge, people started talking about it. Yeah. And it was interesting to me to look at, in Fuller's book, who he found credible, why he found them credible, and thinking about my own experience that I've talked about at the festival for the past couple of years now. It took me a while to feel like I could talk about it. And part of that is because I didn't think I would be looked at as credible. And so I struggled with that. So that's a topic that's kind of important to me. And I want other people to know that, because we do kind of struggle still with the government taking us seriously, especially if we're not officials, if we're not police officers, if we're not trained investigators, how do we get them to take us seriously? Well, we can be the best witnesses we can possibly be. And how do we do that? So I'll be looking at that. And I have a theory about why they visit us. So I'm going to delve into that a little bit.
One of the things that first interested me about Exeter beyond the obvious, that being the incident at Exeter and its close proximity to Betty and Barney's Hills, lives where they lived and had their families, etc., is, how can I say, I've just lost the thought. Mike, will you tell us a little about your talk while I pull that one back?
Sure. So I'm doing the coast with the most. It's just kind of a framework to look at basically a timeline of different cases from the East Coast to the West Coast. I have it set up, not really to battle, but just take a look at the different types of cases we get on the West Coast versus the East Coast. And just to give everybody a good look at the timeline across the nation. There's so many cases, I only left out the middle of the country because you couldn't fit them all in. But so this was just more of a framework to try to get the bigger discussion out there.
What I was going to say was Dean Merchant, who is a great UFO historian, who is truly one of the people without whom we wouldn't have this festival, wrote a paper, one of the most interesting UFO-related research papers to this day that I've ever read. And it was about how when the 509th nuclear bomb wing stationed at the Roswell Army Airfield, and of course, the legendary group involved in the Roswell incident, when they reestablished themselves, I think it was at Pease Air Force Base, some years later, the UFO activity followed them for real. And it was so well documented that I brought it to the attention of the folks who organized the Roswell Festival and conference every year, and they invited him to speak. But due to health concerns, he wasn't able to give the paper. So I gave it for him, and he, of course, got the check. But it really impressed the Roswell audience, and I think I gave it also in Exeter, whatever it was, 6 or 7 years ago. The history of the UFO reality has some very noteworthy stops in New England and in the Northeast in general, but Exeter is one of kind of the ground zeros as far as I'm concerned. Also, off tangent to a degree, is for anybody that comes in for this event, especially if they're not from the area, what you're going to be greeted by is a town that looks very much in places like a Currier and Ives print come to life. It is, for a lot of us, emblematic of some of the greatest architectural landscapes and buildings in New England. The beautiful church that is just next to the town hall is late 18th century and very much worth a visit as well. Just walking down the streets and thinking about when the buildings were built, what was going on at the moment, and the fact that Exeter, New Hampshire was the capital of the United States of America for a period of time during the war of the Revolutionary War. The sense of community that exists between people who I guess share common interests is, not some surprise. But you touched on it earlier, both of you, in that a weekend like this, at an event like this, there's kind of a bell jar over the whole thing where you're in a safety zone. And you can turn around to the person sitting next to you after a talk and begin to chat about something. You would be uncomfortable talking to your oldest best friend or, your wife's sister or your kids. It's intellectually liberating. And because I think the weather, the sense of community, that if we usually do have good weather, that everybody gets to hang together, and all of the speakers are completely accessible throughout the event. There's, nobody taking off for green rooms and sitting in private air conditioning, eating organic foods by themselves. Very egalitarian. Have you guys, I'm thinking, of course, about speakers past, and dear Paul Eno, who we lost 2 years ago, who is a legendary broadcaster and journalist, and one of the most colorful, intelligent, thoughtful, interesting guys and prolific writers I've ever known. Um, the people that we get to meet at these events often are worth the price of admission all on their own. I'm sure you guys agree and have your own memories of Paul and some of the events that have happened in that hall and around it, or at dinner before or after, that you carry with you with much affection.
Absolutely. Paul Eno still, there's a huge hole in my heart that, he took, with him when he left us.
Yeah.
He definitely he had a huge impact on the field and on myself, and I think on so many attendees. And, who can forget, every single radio broadcast, the fire trucks would have to drive through and interrupt us. Happened every time.
Yes.
He always had such a good sense of humor about it all. Yeah.
He was one of the most thoughtful people I ever knew, and one of the deepest in that, having studied for the priesthood, become involved in the paranormal in part with people like the Roans, and really the pillars of the paranormal community. He was one of the most ethical people I knew. And I remember one point, maybe half a dozen years back, I had a real issue with somebody in the work. I hadn't talked to anybody about it, least of all them. And I found myself comfortable talking to Paul about it very naturally. His thinking helped me decide what I was going to do. But there are certain people you can just look to for that kind of thing, and probably a higher ratio as far as I'm concerned at events like this. You also, when you're up on the stage looking at the audience, that there is a considerably higher percentage of experiencers, abductees, empaths, seekers, researchers, investigators in that audience than, a generic audience in that same space. And some of the stories that you get told in quiet moments are worth the ride as well. Have either of you something memorable that somebody shared with you, or somebody you met, or somebody you began to work with that began at the conference come to mind?
Yeah. So we were just talking about Paul, and such a great loss to all of us. He never knew our names and took us right under his wing, and then we've lost other great people, like Stan Friedman, who's spoken there, personal friends along the way. It comes with doing something for this long. Yeah. But there's also a young gentleman. Well, he was a young gentleman when we first started coming, a little boy named Cody. He's now taller than I am. So there's also beautiful things. We've got to watch him grow up in this system through the festival each year.
Yeah.
Exeter, go ahead.
No, finish, Mike.
And I just want to quickly jump back to Peter's point about the atmosphere of Exeter. I think a lot of it is because you can touch and feel it. This isn't something that happened. You can go to the site, see where it happened. The auditorium where we're sitting and speaking is right above where the police station was, where this all went down in 1965. You're really touching history in this special little bubble of community. And that audience is well-versed. They'll ask you questions on stage that'll stump you. I mean, there are no experts there. It is just a coming together of like-mindedness.
It also strikes me that in a number of memorable cases, now that I think about it, we've seen parents or a parent come back year after year with one or more of the same kids. And I'm sure if there were a talk where there were something that would be considered inappropriate or problematic for a young person, we'd let them know. It's never really come up. And that's been very interesting as well. What a way to normalize what for us as kids would have been considered super outsider stuff and kind of thing you don't talk to your parents about, or it's such a healthy atmosphere like that. Also, there are always people there for the first time. And I think if you're going to go to one of these events for the first time, this is as good a one to start with as any. It has such balance to it. Again, in terms of if you're a little intimidated by the subject, people are having fun. And you, again, can enjoy the popular culture aspect and celebrate it, or get in that hall. And it occurs to me also, more and more, I'm sure people less and less are attending a talk, an illustrated talk in a hall, in a library, in a Saturday in a school, and it's not very high tech. It's kind of arcane, and it's one of the great American traditions as far as I'm concerned. We're talking about a subject that I keep reminding myself is one of the very few in this increasingly divisive world with even the potential to bring people together, people of very different political beliefs, for starters. And that's one of the main reasons I think it's going to continue to grow, no matter what the soap opera kabuki playing out, in the House of Representatives, and the speed that things are going or not going continues over the years. It is such an interesting time to be in this work. And I am particularly curious to, just by the time we get to the panel discussion, which for me is, it's sort of like the icing on the cake. You've now heard all the talks, you've got all the speakers up there, and like a town meeting. Well, it is a town meeting, an exo town meeting, I guess we could call it. You can go up to the mic and ask any or all of these people any question you like. That's pretty precious and really emblematic of our democracy in many ways, but hyper focused on this subject. I know something, of course, of your backstories because we've known each other for years. But Valerie, would you mind giving our viewers a sense of how this all began for you, and a little bit on your childhood, where you were born, and your family?
Sure. Well, fun fact, I'm related to Abraham Lincoln. So I have a tie to Exeter that way.
I thought you looked familiar.
Yeah. So I grew up in Derry, New Hampshire, about 25 minutes from Exeter. And when I was about 4 years old, I had an encounter with a UFO and some beings with my father that for years and years and years, I thought was just a dream, a really vivid dream that I could not ever shake.
Did he and you ever discuss it, Valerie?
We did not. He passed away in 1997, and I hadn't quite gotten into the paranormal research side of things.
Yeah.
And I think part of our experience was erasing some of it, and he was much more fearful of the experience than I was, because he was in his late 30s. He had the human conditioning by that point. Even though he was interested in UFOs, he would talk about it occasionally, but not as a personal thing. He would talk about, there's a lot of UFO reports in that part of New Hampshire. He would say things like that offhand.
Did he ever try to steer the conversation away if you would bring the subject up?
I don't think I ever really brought it up, because it was just up until I met Mike, I thought it was just a dream. Yeah. And then Mike, when we had KRI, had the Social Saucers group, where people could come in. You could be an experiencer, you could just be interested in the topic. and people would talk about it, and they would, as people talked about their experiences, I started to notice commonalities. Dean Merchant was hugely influential when he came in one day to our group and had a map of hotspots in New Hampshire and pointed out Derry. He pointed out Route 28, which is exactly where our experience happened. And I went,
gosh.
okay, I can't ignore this and call it a dream anymore. I have to look more into this. And my father had unfortunately been gone for, a while by then.
What did he do professionally, Valerie, out of curiosity?
Well, he was a Navy man. I know that is often a tie. He worked in computers. He worked for Bell Telephone when that existed, and that I think changed over to 9X at some point. And I think that's what the company was when he passed away.
And in a way, not an unusual profile. I've spoken with so many people in different parts of the country and over the years in interviews with experiences that began very much that way, that untrusted memory or that repressed memory, myself included. Mike, was your awareness of your early childhood events something that you were aware of in childhood, or did that come to you later? And can you tell us a bit about your childhood and growing up?
Yeah. I mean, on the surface, my childhood was a regular all-American childhood. Nothing special, but nothing bad either. But my first memory was around the age of 3.5, and I remembered it from the moment. We grew up in a family where you could talk about ghosts all day, paranormal, at my grandfather's house, but nobody ever spoke about UFOs. Like, mother said, I was always interested, but they didn't really think anything of it. The property we were living on at the time, before we get to your next question, used to be my great-grandfather's, and he was actually an alchemist for what became Duracell batteries before it was bought out by Duracell. And we had all kinds of, little bottles everywhere. My mother used to freak out because we'd go digging in the yard.
Did you put together consciously that what you were going through was different than other kids, or did you assume this was happening to other children as well?
Not until about school age. That's when you start realizing it's not happening to everybody else. Nobody else is talking about this. I was a poster child for the behind your mother's leg kid. I didn't want to talk to anybody, so I had severe social anxieties, for all of my life. I don't know what to do. I wouldn't be me without them, And then just one day it was actually Bud Hopkins' book Intruders, because we were talking about earlier. And that's when I read it and realized it's like, oh, this is what's going on. That's the first time I put it to like abductions and aliens and this and that. There had been other incidents from that first one until that time as well. And it kind of finally formed a picture. And it was, I don't know, late 20s, early 30s when I'm like, I need to do something about this. Nobody should have to go through this alone. And just started working with it in the groups, and you meet people like Val. And the groups are amazing because that's when it's not as cookie cutter what the TV shows and the movies show you. How much and what's common within these experiences so far spread and wide. It's amazing.
I think they also serve to, normalize, if that's the word, or begin to give group members, and I was honored to be a non-participating member of what I'm pretty sure was the very first UFO support group, the one that Bud began back when. And once any group like that it is absolutely understood and working, that whatever passes between the individuals stays in the room. It opens up, for some people, an opportunity to absolutely be cathartic, or to get validation that they would have never imagined. And I would say a word right now for rational skeptics listening in, thinking, aha, I've heard about, this power of suggestion, and in small groups especially, and perhaps it's a presenting sign for a certain psychological dysfunction. I'm still up in the air about this. I can understand why some folks would feel that way. And, it's not completely impossible that it's not. But this is not that. And again, I say that as somebody that a recovered memory for me that came out of nowhere after more than 14 years completely changed the path that I was on. And not willingly, I would say at first. But the more people that come forward and the more people that become public in this, the more people will feel comfortable coming forward, at least to their friends and groups, and being comfortable with it. In certain parts of the country and the world, that's more problematic than others. But again, that sense of general camaraderie that is part of these events. And even if it's somebody you don't know, you're spending the weekend seeing them on and off. Also, the conference has had, just a few years ago, Ralph Blumenthal was one of our speakers. And Ralph is a Pulitzer Prize winning investigative journalist for the New York Times, who wrote, I'm sure, what will stand as the definitive biography on Dr. John Mack. He and his wife gave a talk, wife Deborah, about the book that they published, I guess, 2 or 3 years ago, a children's book on UFOs that did not pull its punches, and very impressively was published by a university press. That is pretty scarce going. In their case, the University of New Mexico. And you can bet with the university's name attached to it, that book was gone over carefully. The opportunity to begin to educate kids in a way that we certainly didn't have back then. UFO stuff was mostly misinformed or highly stylized or reduced children's stories and really having no substance. And now it is changing. It very much is changing. Have either of you ever really worked with a family or the same members of the same family because they're joined in their experiences?
I have not.
Yeah, I have most of the experiences seem to be in one individual of the family. Yep. The others have had some smaller stuff. Now, whether that's they don't remember or don't want to, that's hard to determine. But even just at face value, if this one individual is having most of the experiences, what a lot of people don't realize is how stressful that is on the whole family structure. One person might be going through it, but the whole family is dealing with it.
Like any more conventional trauma, for sure. You reminded me, one of the most memorable meetings I ever had with an individual who was an abductee and very well documented happened years ago, although I saw him again about 2 years ago when I gave a talk near Buffalo, New York. And this gentleman, Bill, is an electrician. He is married to a nurse. They live in a very nicely maintained old farmhouse some miles from the nearest town. It's set on a farm kind of road, and a large field is behind them, and then behind the field is a forest. We arrived at dusk at their house, myself and the invited researchers, Bill as a lifelong abductee and his wife being turned off when he would be taken, and bedroom visitations were the most common, slept on his stomach. And I've never had another account like this. He's sleeping and it's starting to happen. And he is simply rising off the mattress and will pass through the ceiling and then the roof. And as usual, what'll happen will happen. But something went wrong somewhere. And as his molecules were a quarter of an inch or so into the ceiling material, the switch went off and gravity took over. And bang, he fell down on the bed, immediately waking up his wife and having a really interesting wound on one shoulder blade that even as a nurse, she knew they had to go to the emergency room for, which they did. What I don't remember here is what they told the people at the emergency room, but it was dealt with. And he was a very caring man who knew what had happened to him was significant within the work, and had shown this scar to a number of people and asked me if I wanted to see it. And that sort of prurient part of myself said, sure, I want to see your scar from Paul. And the other part of myself said, I don't need to see it. You don't have to take your shirt off again you're not a lab animal or not that. Anyway, one of the things that I remember about their home, and it was that kind of American home that is really sensible. The appliances are all good name brands. I would say a Sears sensibility. Nothing fancy, everything sturdy. But sitting in an open floor plan ground floor and looking around, I realized 360 degrees at any point, I could see one of maybe 15, without exaggerating, clocks. And they were not clock collectors. Some people who have missing time as a fairly regular part of their life, and I don't even know if it's that conscious. They just want to have clocks around to verify experience. But that's, one small pie slice of this area of the abduction phenomena within UFO studies. And it's, I think probably the most challenging area for most folks, and with good reason. We all have gone through our own personal little doors and our own personal BCADs, the things we measure our lives by. For many of us are UFO paranormal related. Mike, in your group, the backgrounds of people vary, or there may be more alike because they're all from the same region and working in. What's that profile like in your group over the years?
It's changed, over the years. It can change from month to month. For the most part, it is more of a slightly older crowd. There's not a lot of young people involved, or not enough young people willing to come out and admit to it or start wondering or worrying about it. Other than that, though, different backgrounds. Some have been servicemen. Some have actually done the studies under John Mack in the 90s. Some people are just, really supportive and really curious, think they might have had some, don't know if they belong there. It's a pretty good mix.
One of the things I'm going to ask one of our next guests, because of course we're going to be joined by Steve Bassett and Martin. Steve began his involvement in the entire world of UFO studies with no previous interest by answering an ad to work for John Mack, doing work in Cambridge, and that was it for Steve. He never looked back, but what a way to begin. It would have been wonderful if John had lived long enough to be part of this great event, having a strong association with New England as well. Stanton Friedman, of course, was a regular, as was Kathy Martin, who is still out there and doing her good work. But I think that was another emblematic kind of reason that folks would attend. And for a lot of us, we don't just read the books, we love the books. We love books. I joke sometimes with people that what you're seeing behind me is a green screen to make me look smart. It is actually real books. And if you're a reader and you love books and you're lucky enough to have enough room to have them around you, for a lot of us, having them signed or inscribed is special. And as authors, I know you know that feeling. But it was always particularly interesting watching people, young people, older people, contemporaries, with Stanton Friedman, because he was so engaging and loved the action. I think for a lot of us, this is one of the high points. You know, you do your work, but this is as social as we get, hanging out with our peers and with the good people that show up year after year, a percentage of whom move on to become friendly acquaintances, and a percentage of those who go on to become friends and good friends as well. I'm sure you have the same experience. One of my favorite things about being in Exeter, it's very different than where I am here in New York State, is the architecture and what it represents. And the fact that history has determined that the original Republican Party was not only founded in Exeter, New Hampshire. It's right, the building itself is noted, you know, in the area. Also, a lot of great places to eat, a number of which I'm already looking forward to, and delighted that the speakers will be fed lunch. That is pretty classy. Not every conference has that. We have less than 10 minutes to go. Valerie, for folks who have festival, or really for anyone who has any special thoughts to help lure them along to Exeter this weekend with us?
Just to really keep in mind how fun it is. It's serious, but it's fun. There's something for everybody. I was actually over the weekend talking to somebody who said he might be bringing his grandkids. And I said, that's great. There's a costume contest. There's a pet costume contest, trolley ride. I'm like, there's so much to do. You know, you don't have to go in and sit and listen to the speakers. But if you want to, that's an amazing opportunity to have your mind open to something that maybe you didn't think about before. You know, and I think that's the variety of the speakers that, you know, the conference always draws is fascinating to me. You know, I've seen it morph over the years that we've been involved. You know, there's some regulars, but then we get, you know, some new people coming in here and there. And everybody brings something extremely thoughtful and mind-bending, mind-opening. And I mean, you can't get better than that.
There's also something about that hall. I'm a romantic in that sense, but good acoustics and that old-fashioned wraparound balcony, open seating down there, and the heritage that it really is part of. The fact that we are doing this in a former revolutionary capital of the United States of America, that it's held in a hall where Abraham Lincoln spoke, and that helped propel him to the presidency, in a town where a major political party began, it really is an innately American event more and more. And next year is the 250th anniversary of this country. Incredibly young in a poignant way when we think about it, and moving at an accelerated speed. That will be a pretty special conference as well, I think. I will be doing the drive there and back in 2 days. It's almost 400 miles for me, and it's not like you're in your 20s and you want to race through it. So I will be the house guest on Thursday and Monday night of one of last year's speakers, Laird Scranton and his wife Risa, who I have been authorized to take out to dinner on behalf of the conference in lieu of payment at a motel. I think we're getting off pretty well. And it's a nice drive, but as you know, Mike, I am aiming to undercut that Friday afternoon traffic and get that zip drive to you guys as soon as possible. Your thoughts, Mike, in closing on an extra push and an invitation to the good folks of the area and some folks who might not have been thinking even about attending this, but hey, it's a special event. It's Memorial Day weekend. You don't have to go to the beach.
Yeah, if you have any interest in the subject matter, whether it's even a curiosity, you're going to want to come. And if you don't, you're still going to want to come. This is like an experience you've never had. Before you even get anywhere near the town hall, rolling into Exeter that weekend is a sight to behold. It looks like Norman Rockwell got a hold of plastic aliens.
It's not the best description I've ever heard.
But yeah, no, people, there is such a camaraderie. People don't argue, like fight. They argue about, like, no, that shirt's from this year. Like, people are proud to say, have their collections. Say, I was here every year. And I think it's only getting worse now with the police badges. And I mean, it's really become a tourist destination, even if it's just for a souvenir. But there's so much great information. It's so friendly. It's so accessible. And it all goes to children's charities. I mean, you can't beat it. This is not lining somebody's pockets.
It's true. And for those that want the fun of having, some of the merchandise, it's always been high quality. The shirts are particularly fun. Hats, all kinds of the usual Hazarai. The Kiwanis set up a series of large tents in front of the city hall for really basic, quick lunches that you can, just have at the break. And all of the restaurants around are also very happy to take your money. It's, again, we're all looking forward to it, and surreal as it seems, in a few days, we will be there. And right now, we have about a minute and a half, in which time we can do, just about anything. It's a wonderful thing about live radio, although nothing has gone wrong on this broadcast. Every once in a while, it crashes and burns, and it's exciting. I like to think about it as kind of a NASCAR for intellectuals.
Can I ask you what you've asked us, Peter? What are your thoughts on the festival? How have they changed? Because I remember when you first heard about it, you heard the word festival, and you said, no, I'm a serious researcher. I don't want to be part of a festival.
That's right. And that was applied specifically to the McMinnville Festival, the first one I worked with. But what I learned at that festival was that the word festival does not denote being mocking or condescending or mean-spirited. It is about having a good time. And even if you are a serious student or investigative researcher or speaker or whatever, lighten the heck up and have a good time as well, and then do your serious talk. For me, again, that central point of this money goes to children's services is about as good as it gets. We're doing important work in the community, educating people in the process and taking pride in our work. This is Peter Robbins with my guests Valerie Lofaso and Mike Stevens, and we will be back with two new guests after a 4-minute break. See you on the other side.
The Unx Network presents a health and wellness spiritually based brand of hemp-derived CBD products made by Hopewell Farm in Harrogate, Tennessee. We apply our Kathara energy work with all of our plants and products. Our products made in small batches with only 2 ingredients of pure hemp, full-spectrum crude oil, and coconut-derived MCT oil. Third-party lab tested for potency and legal THC levels with 6 strengths of 1 ounce oil to choose from. Know what you're buying and get what you pay for from Hopewell Farm. Applied directly to a specific area, Hopewell Farm topical salve in 1 ounce and ½ ounce sizes made with pure hemp crude oil, comfrey extract, and all natural ingredients. Find the Hopewell Farm link and coupon code on the Unx Network website at unxnetwork.com. That's unxnetwork.com.
If you want something fun to do with the family this summer, listen up. It's the ultimate celebration of the iconic sci-fi universes that have captured people's imaginations for generations, and it's taking place in Bonne Terre, Missouri. Special guests include a NASA astronaut, Disney artist, YouTube content creator, and characters from the Star Wars universe, also robots and world-class model builders. The Space Museum and Grissom Center in Bonne Terre presents its latest installment of Show Me Space 2025 with Show Me Sci-Fi Space on Saturday, June 28 from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. The Space Museum and Grissom Center is located at 118 East School Street in Bonne Terre. Call 573-358-1200 or visit space-mo.org. That's space-mo.org.
The new book, How to Research a Haunted House by paranormal investigator Margie Kay and professional researcher Violet Wisdom, is now available from Unx Media. This one-of-a-kind book explains how to do research on a house with uncommon methods and resources used by historic home researchers, and how to determine who may be doing the haunting and why. How to research a haunted house can be used by homeowners, renters, investors, and it should be in the library of all professional paranormal investigators. Get this unique book at unxmedia.com or amazon.com. That's unxmedia.com or amazon.com.
And we are back with a new guest, my friend Steve Bassett, who is the executive director of Paradigm Research Group, better known as PRG, founded in 1996 to end a government-imposed embargo on the truth behind extraterrestrial-related phenomena. He's spoken to audiences around the world about the implications of disclosure, given over 1,200 radio and television interviews with PRG's advocacy work extensively covered by national and international media, including CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, The Washington Post, and The New York Times. PRG produced 6 X conferences, as in exopolitics, in the Washington, D.C. metro area, in Gaithersburg, Maryland, and at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C. In 2013, PRG organized and conducted a citizen hearing on disclosure at the National Press Club in Washington. And in November of 2014, launched a 2-year political initiative out of Washington that whether and whenever possible injected the ET issue into the 2016 presidential campaign. He is also co-founder of the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance, a nonprofit organization dedicated to bringing relevant researchers and authors, abductees, and experiencers together. And I'm also going to introduce a speaker, a panelist who will follow. Martin Willis is an aficionado of the enigmatic realm of UFOs, has harbored a fascination with the subject since his formative years. Martin regards the exploration of the mystery of UFOs and UAPs as one of the paramount importance and unparalleled excitement. His interest in astronomy underscores his conviction that humanity is not alone in the universe, fueling a steadfast scientific curiosity regarding the vast cosmos. As a passionate advocate for the UFO community, Martin founded the acclaimed podcast UFO in November of 2011 and now conducted over 600 illuminating interviews on the subject. His expertise and dedication have led to many prestigious speaking and keynote and event hosting engagements. Steve, welcome back to Meanwhile Here on Earth. And where did you go?
Peter, he dropped off, and Martin hasn't been here yet.
Yeah, I know. He'll be coming in within a few minutes, and yeah,
right. Steve was there. I mean, he was here, but he just fell off.
Well, live radio race. How are you doing these days?
I tell you what.
Looks like we're back.
And here on time and get them to stay here. I'd be doing a lot better.
Sounds good to me. Well, we will continue on and be joined, I am sure, shortly by our two guests. And I'd like to begin this soiree with this heartrending image. I look at this, Valerie and Mike and Race, and I love visual time traveling. First, the pride that must have been taken when the town hall was completed and when the band shell was completed. And can you imagine pre-World War I, lovely concerts there without, well, somewhere in time with those inflated aliens right there. A sign we are all familiar with, but talking about how Abraham Lincoln came to speak at the hall here. It really is a classic looking building. There it is. Norman Rockwell meets the aliens.
I appreciate you sharing these pictures, Peter. You know, I think living here, in this area, I take it for granted and I don't stop and look at the architecture enough. So it's a nice reminder to really see these photographs. It's
always a treat for me. And, you do this work, you've got an imagination, you can't not. And to time trip a bit in your mind and remember, again, the pride and workmanship, these beautiful facades, and what they represented in the community is pride. They're classic looking and an awful lot of fun to, again, visualize. Easy enough to just go back in your mind 100 and 150 years and just change the way people are dressed on the street and know as long as there's no plane passing over and you ignore the cars, you're kind of in the zone.
No, and there's so much history in Exeter. The bandstands there. Exeter has one of the longest running brass bands that's ever played continuously.
Really?
Yes. Lady Liberty on top of the town hall The artist's name escapes me, but he was a famous French artist, and he's well known for other things that you'd know as well. But before the bandstand was in parking spaces was there, that was a fountain, and there were hitching posts, and it was dirt road. But other than that, the landscape looks the same with those grand old buildings.
Yeah. And again, the transformation of the business district. I did a really extensive essay on this, and I must have filed it under some wrong name, but just for a taste of Main Street. And of course, the bookstores, all the windows change appropriately, sometimes with wonderful decorations, other times just goofy as heck to have a good time, and other times with a very real sense of what is going on and the value of this event.
My dentist is on the outskirts of Exeter, and even they have aliens hanging up in their office right now. And they're not in walking distance, you know. So I thought that was pretty cool when I saw that.
That's great. Right, there's Seacoast Saucers, and that's set up right in front of the town hall. And a number of these around, which always make me smile. In the past, you're standing in my parking space, buddy.
Oh, there's Paul Eno. I see the side of his head.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Bob behind him. Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, for gosh sakes. Boy, that's good work. And more clear here. Paul there in the back, and me and Kathy there. You are Mike, and Jim over on the left, and Charlie just behind. And is
Steve Ward and Marina.
There you go.
And then off in the back in the plaid shirt is our good friend Ken Owens.
Oh, for gosh sakes, yeah.
Regular attendee.
And while Jim Weiner and Charlie, while Jim Weiner won't be speaking this year, Charlie Folse will. And Charlie and Jim were two of the four men involved in, once again, one of the very best documented UFO abduction events that we have on record that happened while they were camping, the so-called Allagash incident. And by a good twist of fate, both Charlie and Jim are professional artists, and the presentation they do together or separately is really engaging. I am so looking forward to hearing and seeing it again and seeing Charlie again. Now, this next group of pictures, I will say I have never shown publicly. Certainly as a set, you're the first. This were taken 9 years ago. Here I am in the book room, sitting and trying to have a reasonable conversation with an old friend.
Oh,
right?
That's a great shot.
All good. And wouldn't you know it, there's always somebody that wants to steal your thunder. Sometimes they're subtle about it, other times not quite as much.
Yeah. That's a great photo too.
Mm-hmm. I'm fairly proud of that one. I will say this is not something that will be part of your weekend up there, but I guess it was about 6 years ago, ended early on Sunday, and Kathleen Martin asked me and our friend Denise Stoner, who is a co-author of one of her last books, if we wanted to take a ride with her and just see where she grew up and, you know, where her aunt and uncle lived and her grandparents. And of course, we jumped at the opportunity. And the next hour or so was incredibly moving, absolutely fascinating, and a lot of fun. And we ended up somewhere I never thought I would visit. I won't give the location. It's obviously in the general area. But here.
Nice.
Yeah. And then a photo section. On a lighthearted note, I guess 2 years ago, I took a break and observed a car that I would like to own and had a friend photograph me with it. And I think you'll all agree. I mean, am I made for this car? Is it made for me? I mean, there's something that speaks to me about it. Does it speak to you?
That's a cool car.
Yeah.
Matches the tie.
And
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't think of myself as short as a rule, although some people tell me I am. But I think the scale there works too. On that note, welcome, Martin, and welcome, Steve. It's good to see you guys.
Hey, everyone. Good to be here.
Yes,
And Steve, you are in Washington, D.C. as we speak to you, or on the West Coast?
No, Washington, D.C. I wouldn't miss the fun.
Excellent. Martin, a quick note of thanks to you in assisting us in a current challenge that we're dealing with, one that has me visibly tired and it's falling over some of my words, but very excited and looking forward to both of you guys joining us this year. Martin, you are a veteran of the event. Can you begin by telling us a bit about yourself and the talk that you will be giving?
Okay, sure. First of all, I've never spoken there before. I've gone there on many, many times.
Oh, that's right.
But, yeah, that's right. I mean, I've
Yeah, you and Steve were both great.
About Paul, last year. That's the only time I ever really spoke there. But anyway, I'm right in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, Betty and Barney Hill, territory here, where my cousin recently, I just found out my cousin used to listen to Barney talk stories for hours.
Oh, gosh.
He would stop on his mail route because my cousin's mother was very nice, and they'd sit and have pie and everything and talk for I don't know how he got away with it, but anyway, it was he rarely talked about the UFO, but he did talk about it a few times.
Wow.
But, yeah. So my talk is going to be about captivating and unknown encounters, ones that I can almost guarantee you that no one's ever heard of, that I think are totally fascinating. And I've talked, directly with the firsthand witnesses. So that's basically what it's going to be about. And some of them I think are quite remarkable, and I hope it goes over well.
Steve, I am so looking forward to your being a part of this special Exeter conference. And it is such an historic location that you will appreciate, I think, a great deal. Can you tell the folks, well, I'm making an educated guess on the general topic, but can you tell the folks what you will be, your subject for your talk will be?
Oh, yeah, sure. By the time I get up there, I think we'll have confirmation of the witnesses for the hearing coming up on the 9th. Mike Herrera is one of them, and there's two others, but it still hasn't been formally put out by the committee. But I think we've got 2 Air Force, 1 Navy. That hearing's on the 9th. I'll talk about that. And we got the bill has already been sent into the Senate. Talk about that. In other words, next month is going to be a pretty significant milestone in a lot of ways. And so this conference really is happening just as it's about to begin. So I'll be doing that. Mostly I want to take questions. And I'm definitely looking forward to try to get some questions from some of the young adults, because I know there are kids that go to this. And if they come to speak and to see me, I'm going to, start, want to know what they want. What do they think is going on? Particularly the ones that are not in high school yet, up the 8th grade. So I'm going to be doing Q&A, talking to kids, and just have a good time. Pretty straightforward.
Outstanding. Questions you will get, and I'm guessing from a wide assortment of audience members. Steve, have you ever visited New Hampshire?
No, I made it to Connecticut. I never made it up to New Hampshire.
That's close. That's great. Well, all the more reason. I think you'll find it very special, as we've been talking about. Yeah. It is kind of a cross between a Currier and Ives print and a Steven Spielberg movie. You've observed how communities either come together and embrace events like this or remain somewhat split. Roswell is a good example. Main Street and the business community has long been behind the event, but there's a segment of the population that still feels that the world's poking a little fun at them. In McMinnville, you watched the transformation go from the very beginning, when people were almost insulted by it, to this huge event. It changes the profile of communities a bit, and I think ultimately for the better. Is that your observation in UFO conferences set in festivals?
You talking to me?
Yes.
Well, one of the interesting things is the festivals. I mean, think about it, right? There are actually quite a few now. A lot of people don't know all of them, but you've got McMinnville, of course. You've got Exeter, you've got Edinburgh, you've got Roswell, and I think
Pine Bush in New York.
That's right, and there's others. It's at least 10, yeah. Right? And many of them have a pretty decent track record. So you have various communities that are celebrating the ET presence, usually because there was an event there.
Correct.
And they've been doing it for years. The kids come down, they dress up in costumes. Is this what you would expect from human beings, utterly terrified and petrified of the fact that they may not be alone, and there's entities there that have better tech than we do, maybe come from somewhere else? It doesn't scream terror to me. It seems like, hey, pretty nice, pretty cool, and they do it year after year. So it doesn't really matter whether the number of people in that particular community, it's 8% are really into this, or 10 or 20. The point is there is a plenty that are, and it reflects the fact that we're quite ready to deal with this. We've been ready for a long, long time, and that's why the festival. And I haven't been to Roswell for a while, but I did one a while back. We had a parade down the street. I think you do that as well. It's like, again, we're celebrating the presence of these ETs, and I assure you, it's not simply because they're cool. It's because, particularly among the parents, they understand that they grew up, and their kids grew up, and their grandkids are growing up in a world that is on the edge of destruction at almost any time. Yeah. And they have an almost existential dread in them. That's why we need all the medications and everything. And they don't want that. They see this as possibly the way out of that. There's nothing else, frankly, that I can imagine if I were a parent, and I'm not, that I would be going, yeah, everything's going to be great for the kid. I'm sure things will be great 10, 20, 30 years out. No. Half the damn academics in the country that even address it, basically saying we're just about cooked.
You remind me, Steve, for that segment of society that understandably has an anxiety about all this. A very memorable song from the great Rodgers and Hammerstein show, South Pacific, I Whistle a Happy Tune. That idea of, if I behave as though I'm more courageous than I am in the face of an anxiety-producing situation, I will be less anxious. And
maybe I'm not with you in that. I don't think it's a matter of courage. I think that people, particularly the parents, sense that this is in fact going to be our salvation in a way, that we have a future, and that this somehow is tied to that. And so they want to celebrate that, right? I mean, the event was pretty cool, and it was a very good one. The people involved were very wonderful. But did it justify the effort and the time and the money that's being spent on year after year on these festivals? Not on its face. But I think people are starting to understand that this presence isn't trivial. It's not like we just had some visitors and they showed up. It is intricately involved in the near future of our species. And of course, that includes all Americans, which are in that species. And that's what I think is behind these festivals, and why I'm intrigued by them, though I have been to a few. And it's a good testimony to all the people out there that are trying to use the fear factor as a way to push you away, right? Push it away. It's not working very well anymore, obviously.
I agree, Steve. And with somebody with no background in community planning or finance, one of the things that really began to interest me, McMinnville, Pine Bush, Roswell, um,
Edinburgh.
Edinburgh for sure, and that's a great festival. And Exeter, every community's back is financially to the wall now. Has been for years, but it's now officially going to be getting worse. And if there's something that your community can do to celebrate itself and maybe put forward something you're locally known for, it's often agricultural, strawberry festival or apples or what have you. This is legitimate. I think not most, but every UFO related festival that I'm aware of does have a righteously serious event in its background. And why not, at the same time as you are bringing in another revenue stream for your community, educate people, and while you're doing that, educate your own community to what's happened in their backyard. It's a win-win situation. And it's, again, one of the reasons I like being a part of it. You bring up an interesting point, Steve, which is that people like us, Martin, Mike, Valerie, the other speakers, without thinking about it as part of an organized movement, we are all part of this process. Simply by doing what we do, we advance this process. And there is, I would say, a process called disclosure with a capital D, and a major event that we may be heading toward with the same name. But in that sense, we advance forward every day, sometimes maybe more than we're aware of. And I will say here right now, while I think of it, because I am now released from my non-disclosure agreement and can say it, in January, I was out in Los Angeles shooting a long interview for an upcoming episode of Ancient Aliens. It will be one devoted to the abduction subject. It took a bit to persuade me to do it, but I came away feeling it's going to be high quality. I will say nothing other than I know some of the folks who are in it, and all of them impressed me. And that it is scheduled, I believe, for premiering on September 18th on the History Channel, Ancient Aliens Season 17, episode either 11 or 12, entitled The Abduction Files. Make a note.
Sounds good to me. I fell out of their Rolodex years ago. I don't know why. Probably just, fell out. Nobody found the card. One of the things I'm looking for, I'll tell you, if we get disclosure from the president, which I can make a case that it's kind of looking interesting, I want to be at every single festival the following year. Every single one. Go. It's going to be lavish. It's going to be tons of money. We're going to be treated like kings, right? Cruising around the parade, people coming up. I mean, come on, we waited a long time for this. So that's a good 9 festivals at least. That'll to my year. That'll be wonderful.
It's like the idea of going through the eye of a needle. Post-disclosure, I mean, books like Richard Dolan, Bryce Sable's, well, there's no book quite like it, AD, but many of us have lots of different ideas about how things are going to change. Brave New World and beyond, for sure.
Well, the festivals, I know how they're going to change. They're going to quadruple in size. You don't think they're not going to throw everything into that festival the year after? Roswell, my God, there'll be cars stretched out on the highways, people living in tents. It's going to be great. It's not going to be the level of Burning Man, but it's going to be big. Okay. And I want to be at every single one of them and let's lap it up because I don't have that much time left. So I got to get all the praise, in one big,
the best coming attraction I have ever had of that sensation and an event like that you're talking about, it's not done quite the same way now, but the 2 times that I spoke in McMinnville, Oregon, they have a parade. It's smaller than the Roswell parade, but it's hysterical and it's brilliant. It's about a mile lined on both sides with about 10,000 adults,
10
children, and dogs, all in costume. The dogs often with green vegetable dye on them and aluminum foil and of course the obligatory Dealey Boppers. And your job is to sit in the back of usually an open car, circa 1925 or 30, and Queen Elizabeth waved to the crowd and throw out candy.
Okay, I can do that.
The first year I did this, Stanton Friedman was the other speaker, and neither one of us had done this before or knew what we were getting into, and we each had our own car. I did it a few years later with David Jacobs, who approached it equally somberly, and like me, his face hurt by the end of it, just from laughing and enjoying yourself so much. It's also, what a perfect way to welcome people into the tent and begin to more seriously educate them. It's a great system, and it will be very interesting to see the impact on these established areas of ufological popular culture, as well as other spontaneous or UFO related events that may happen after the fact. We all come from different communities, and I'm wondering if any of you have any thoughts on how disclosure will change the community that you know best. Any thoughts on that, Martin?
Well, first of all, I'd be interested to hear what Steve has in reply to this. You mentioned the current administration. I think that if it doesn't matter the current administration or past administration or administration in the future, how many people are going to, because everything's so politicized and everything's so divided, how many people are going to really listen and take it seriously, or it's just another political game here? There's going to be a big part of that, I think, unless there's what they call forced disclosure, a mass sighting or invasion or something like that. So as far as the people that I know personally that are into this, I think that we're ready for it or whatever. But the average Joe walking down the street, it's going to be probably a shock for a lot of these people. But then again, it might be a week later they're saying, well, I got to pay the mortgage, and I got a car payment, and I got to feed the family.
Life goes on.
Life goes on. Yeah.
I think one thing Travis Walton said it best years ago, talking about the ongoing debate: are they good? Are they bad? Do they mean us well? Do they not? Well, my standard answer to that is, which ones are you talking about? The ones that mean us well, or the ones that if the worst scenario was in place, my idea is that we would all be working in salt mines with little brain controlling hats on our head, looking straight ahead and putting the salt in the bins. Perhaps there is a grand drama going on where human beings are being cued by non-human beings, and the chess game behind the screen is more well attended than we imagine. Or even if it's so, here we are, we're still living our lives. I don't see any, aliens on the streets along with the National Guard to impose their presence on us. So things aren't that bad, at least from, that point of view.
Look, my biggest thing is this. We got to get green out of these festivals. The green alien thing, it got started. I forget how. I forget who put out the first green alien, but they're not green. I think the reptilians don't want.
Well, the LGMs, the little green men. I think it starts back in '47 as just the catchphrase, along with flying saucers.
I looked that up at one time. I think you're right, Peter. It was really early on.
Yeah, I think it was very early. And it was kind of silly, right? Because little green, that's pretty ridiculous. And the whole reptilian thing was not in play at that point. And of course, the kind of green they're talking about was not what the reptilians looked like. And so this green thing just became part of the what's the word I'm looking for? Part of basically the truth embargo. In other words, to the extent that anything kind of took away from the substance, good. Government loved it and helped with it, right? And the media, of course, was happy to encourage that. And so that is one of many little memes that help keep things under control. And as we've moved closer, it's kind of lingered. Now it's not so bad. I mean, things are so far along now that people don't see somebody dressed up as a green alien and go, no, they don't, right? You would be surprised, Martin, the level of awareness on this subject in people. They're not properly polled. It's limited. They usually ask them a couple of questions. So they really haven't asked the kind of questions to understand that awareness. And so they're completely missing out on some of the most important pieces of evidence. What am I talking about? 600 films with ETs in them of every conceivable kind, most of them kind of nasty, but some good ones. 600 films grossing billions and billions of dollars. I estimate something like 70, 80, 100 billion that have been out there for the last 80 years. They've been seen all over the world. Hundreds of them are still archived. They're on the streaming. You got to go into the deep Africa or maybe, I don't know, the Antarctic to find somebody that hasn't seen one of these movies. The idea of extraterrestrials is completely saturated the planet. All right. And that's in the modern era. You go back in the history and they were talking about extraterrestrials 2,000 years ago. And so the idea of ET is nothing radical, new, or anything else. We're saturated in it. And there's that. And then the amount of research that's gotten out from the public arena, the private research and so forth, substantial. See these books back here? He's got his books. There have been thousands. And the documentaries, hundreds of documentaries out and being seen all the time. So the level of awareness and the level of and the reduction in discomfort is way past what is being presented, either in the media or in people that are not really aware of this. And they're assuming that it's much worse than it is. It isn't. Hell, the whole Catholic Church is ready to go. And we could go on and on. So the truth embargo thrived on many things, but one of them was a deliberately instilled fear,
Yes,
concept of threat, and so forth. The government was happy to push it. Even when Reagan decides he wants to do something and he was given some encouragement, he had to come out and use the threat deal. We'll all get together and have peace on Earth if we all have to come together to protect ourselves from the alien threat. So what he was saying is that, like, they provide a fear so great that it overcomes all the fear and hatred you have of each other. And you'll put that aside, and then we'll work with the ETs. But once we kill off the ETs, we're going to go back to killing each other again. All right? And so that whole thing was utterly bogus, but that's about the best he could do.
Well,
I
honestly, Steve, I don't want to interrupt you, but honestly, I think that stems from sort of the Iron Mountain threat. They convened a panel, JFK convened a panel of scientists, philosophers to debate, could human beings exist in a golden era of peace? And when they came out, they concluded that they could not. And from that, they gave 3 examples that could unite humanity. One was global pollution. One was an asteroid coming to Earth, and the other one was a threat from aliens invading us. But there were no friendly alien movies in Reagan's day. They were all invasion movies.
Yeah, there's always been both. I mean, because most people have no idea how many films have been made, I assure you. So many. However,
Well, we got 2 out of 3 of those examples anyway.
So, in terms of that Iron Mountain thing, how many people, if I walked out, down Washington or whatever, and asked them if they know what the Iron Mountain thing was, nobody would know. ETs, they all know it. But more importantly, do you expect anything else from Iron Mountain? In other words, this is a group of people that are basically their whole existence and their salary and their income, their retirement, everything is based upon, constantly spending huge sums of money to defend ourselves against whatever, right? Plenty of countries, no problem there. But if you got an ET, let's do that. They're utterly biased. They have no way of stepping out of that zone and looking at the world in any different way. It's one of the major problems that we have. And so I get it, but it ain't working anymore, right? In other words, if you look at the entire body of ET evidence and you compare it against how we've conducted ourselves in the 21st century, the unbelievably awful things that humans are doing to each other, right? the continued, stockpiling and increasing, not stockpiling, but the increasing of nuclear weapons and making them faster, more powerful, hypersonic missiles. When you look at all of that, it's a god-awful, violent mess. Compared to that, the ET stuff that they're doing, it's like a party.
I seriously don't think God had anything to do with the violence that's going on this planet right now.
What now?
I seriously don't think that God had anything to do with the violence that's going on this planet right now.
Yeah, did I say that? I didn't say that.
Yeah. And then with that said, just because there's a bunch of movies about aliens doesn't mean that the world population is ready for them to all of a sudden appear around the globe. It's like Martin said, it's just going to take something. It's going to take a big volume of these things, a lot like the movie Signs, where these things just start appearing all around the world and there's nothing anybody can do about it. And they stay there because there's a reason these things stay hidden from us all this time. All those books back there that you and Peter have in your background, all of those books, what are they worth? What are they truly worth when you and Martin and me and all of those that have come before us have been preaching this, and we've got all these incidents? I think that it's going to be a lot less of a party, and we're going to be more like counselors for people who can't hold on to the reality that we're not alone.
I'm going to jump in, Race, to say you bring up a point that occurs to me for many years now, going back to that time when any of us would have been considered, oh, that's my friend who's into UFOs. Nice guy or gal, smart, fun to be with, but they really take it seriously. We and people like us, I believe, will be anchors in our immediate communities and communities associated with people who will actually or allegorically say, I'd really like it if you could come and have dinner with my family and answer some questions for my kids. I used to tease you a little behind your back, but I realized you really knew that this was real, and I wonder if you could help me and my family make our way through this. That's not a bad thing either. I think we are spread out all over the world, and part of why we do what we do is because we're the kind of people we are, and certainly there's a willingness to take that role at those times it comes up. Without being specific here, I will say only this past week, somebody very close to me called me about the new husband of the daughter of a friend who has confided that they feel they have had abduction experiences, but they have a very their background is really problematic for them to open up with anyone that they work with. And could I chat with this person? And for them, it was important and a big deal. For me, it was an opportunity to be of service again and take what I know and assist some people further along in the work. Steve, years ago, not long after we met, in fact, I think we had the conversation in 2008 in Liverpool at a quiet moment, talking about how to build, if it were possible, a movement, in the model of old war protest movements like during Vietnam. And I explained to you why I thought it couldn't really be done, certainly without some mass event to bring it to people's awareness. However, that while I don't have a solution to make the interest grow geometrically, every day interest in this subject grows around the world arithmetically. 2, 7, 4 people at a time have an experience, see a documentary, read a book, have a conversation with a friend who has had an experience that impresses them and that they take seriously. The process is unstoppable. And whether or not, or however or not, it becomes part of officialdom, it's still rolling along in its own way, in the best kind of organic community way. You can't put the toothpaste back in the tube.
Yeah, the toothpaste is well out of the tube. 15 years ago, a international polling entity, his name's escaped me, is Aptos, I can't remember the exact name, did 36 countries or 60 countries. They basically polled the entire world using countries that were representative so that they felt that it could be extended to the world. 20% of the world's population, which would be about, 1.5 to 1.8 billion, said that aliens are already living amongst us. 50% of the population of India said they're already living amongst us. And that was just on that question. If they had been asked, do you think there are non-humans in this, in our world, right, somewhere, the number would have been even higher than that. Again, I'm telling you, it is in the interest of the truth embargo that all of the potential positive statistics, positive outcomes be suppressed, constantly suppressing the truth. Not just the truth that ETs are here, anything, any truth that they can suppress that will minimize the ability to get money. We talked about developing a movement. We almost have a movement now. You can kind of see it. Danny Sheehan's New Paradigm Institute is in that zone. I'm completely bankrupt. I have nothing, right? I'll leave a minus estate of $30,000. There has been no money. The truth embargo prevented the funding of this, beautifully prevented the funding of this, to the disgrace of a whole lot of philanthropists who have funded just about everything you can imagine, but not this. And that served the truth embargo, no money. And so we've had to make bricks without straw, like the Israelites were forced to do by the Pharaoh when Noah was giving him Moses was giving him a hard time. We have to go out and scratch in the middle of the night to get a little bit of straw or something, take it back in order to mix it for the bricks without straw, 24 hours a day. That's what we've had to do. And I'll tell you the real history of this, which if somebody gives me $20 million, I'll put together a pitch deck to do the truth embargo movie that almost may have gotten done. The real history of this is far more awful, far more pathetic and disgusting, disgraceful than we really don't talk about. We just don't talk about it that much because it doesn't really help. But it is god awful. And so people spent their lives, they had no money, they wrote the book, they did what they can, and the government said over and over again, you're an idiot, you don't know what you're talking about, you're mentally ill, this is all a lie. And they did it for 80 goddamn years. And they're still doing it now because the DOD deliberately just gave a story, which the Wall Street Journal was going to take, because they offer them inside sources, top-level people, and gave them a story published in the June 5th, June 6th Wall Street Journal. It's a complete lie. It is a complete lie in which they tried to explain that pretty much everything you're seeing was our stuff. You mistook it or deliberately. We were doing it. It's all our stuff. It's not ET. And then they went after Bob Salas and the nuke witness thing because they're scared to death that they're going to get called in to testify. And so they said Bob Salas had it all wrong. It was a giant EMT thing we did back then. Complete lie, right? They're still doing it. They have lied themselves into this corner, but they've also lied about everything else, which is why the world is what it is now, right? Slaughter, genocide, pollution, destruction, paranoia, untold addictions, right? People in the world are addicted to this and that and everything else, particularly America. We lead the world in addictions. This all fundamentally stems from the fact that power, money, power, and political power has simply lied to us endlessly in order to serve their limited the limited group and their personal needs. And the cost has been astronomical, and it could even get worse, right? If we have that nuclear war, then that's it. And nobody's going to give a damn. And, the rich will be in their bunkers in New Zealand. Maybe they'll survive. I don't know. There's an article about that just came out about how all these bunkers may not work out the way they want. I mean, I tend not to get overly worked up, but you can see why. And this is only part of what I know, how awful it is. You can see why I like the idea that there's some festivals and some nice communities that are celebrating this in spite of the fact that the U.S. government would like them to just live in fear and think this is all still a lie until they're dead and they don't have to face the music, right? They're trying to outlive the damn thing. They're trying to outlive us, and then they're trying to outlive the scorn that's coming to them. I won't get this way in Exeter, I assure you, but I want you to understand, I'm an activist. I'm not a journalist. I'm not a researcher. I don't have those protocols. I'm an activist. Yeah. And as an activist, I'm focused exclusively on how badly governments have dealt with this and the consequences. And we know that they do terrible things. They do terrible things, right? They're committing genocide right now in about 8 parts of the country. But still, if you get in that zone, it's hard not to get angry because it just never ends. It never ends. We're completely normalized to the fact that nuclear weapons are getting worse and faster, and we're this close to it. We're completely normalized to whatever genocide is going on. What can you do? We're normalized to this awfulness to the point where eventually it will take us down. And I'll close with this. The highest grossing movie up until recently, $2.5 billion. That's a big deal. A lot of people saw that movie. God knows how many times it's been viewed. Maybe $1.5 billion, $2 billion. Who were the good guys? Avatar. The aliens were the good guys, and the humans were the bad guys.
It occurs to me sometimes, and it's a kind of historic daydreaming. I have read a great deal written by and about President Harry Truman. And if any single individual in power at any given moment had the potential to essentially say, let's learn what we can, but at a certain point we turn to the American people and by extension the world. I go on the radio and I say, after, say, 6 months after Roswell, ladies and gentlemen, it's my solemn duty to inform you that we are not alone in the universe, and go forward from there. How incredibly, unimaginably different the world would have evolved from that one statement. And the fact that even some of our most respected, understandably, historians know that the origins of the national security state was the incredible security around nuclear technology and development. Wrong. It was the Roswell cover-up. That was the piece of sand, the irritant that got into the oyster of history that started building a calcification around it. And, it's easier to bear the calcification, that little sharp piece of sand, if you've got lots of hardened mucus around it. And welcome to the history of post-war world. It is that simple, but impossible for someone educated in accepted history, post-war history, it just sounds too impossible. And yet there it is.
It took both. It was both that really created this grotesque situation. One or the other would have been okay. If we had gone detente right away with the Soviet Union, who helped defeat the Nazis, and said, "Man, we're going to help you rebuild, and have some nice meetings and get together and what have you," and we'd have basically had a unified Europe, Western world, would have been fantastic. And the ET thing would have been totally different and might have come out if we had not had the ET presence at the crash at Roswell. We still have to build a huge military intelligence complex, but it might have been a little less extreme. It might have been a little more engaging in terms of interacting with the public and letting them know what's going on. But they do let us know a lot about the nuclear stuff. We got submarines, we got this, we got that missile, we got the satellites, we got everything. That's no problem, right? On the ET thing, there's nothing here. There's nothing. So it's both. But history does turn on these tiny little things, which is one of the problems of learning history, because it just gives you, the indigestion. If Genghis Khan had fallen out of a tree and died, millions of people would have probably not died early in all of Asia, going all the way to Turkey. But that guy lived, and he slaughtered something like 16, 18, 19 million. And if Truman had done it, he would have changed the 20th century. Absolutely. absolutely changed the 20th century. And so every single move we made going forward in terms of nuclear armaments and the, quote, Soviet Union, United States situation, both sides would have known there's ETs here with advanced technologies and craft, right? And that would have been a factor openly, and their citizens would have known that too. And so the citizens are going to be looking at us and going, wait a minute, why are we building more nukes? Why are we going to spend trillions on submarines and stuff? It's kind of a cool thing going on here. What isn't that more important than which ideology, capitalism or communism is superior? There would have been a lot of pressure. It could have changed everything. That little decision ultimately has cost the lives of untold tens of millions of people. Now, I get it. He was only in office for 3 more years, and he was dealing with something no president could ever imagine. He was a citizen, not a military guy per se, and he's surrounded by all these military people and national security people who were clearly dealing with the Soviet Union thing and pretty much controlling the room. I get that. And so he couldn't act. And then in 52, right, which was, the last year, I think, about halfway through his last year, you got the thing over Washington, one of the most important events that have ever happened on this.
You bet.
And that triggered the Robertson panel, which was put together in the last months of his administration. And so it was literally, there was nothing he could do at that point. And so then it goes to Eisenhower. Eisenhower, of course, a much more serious, I think, person, much more tuned to the issues of national security. But obviously we're deeper into the nuclear standoff that was coming. But he had the gravitas that if he had come forward and said this and said, look, it's going to work out, a lot of people would go, okay, Dwight, good. What pressure was put on him and how he thought, we may never know, unless there's some manuscripts or memoirs that have been held back. Exactly. I'd love to know that. What was Eisenhower thinking? Because he knew from the day he walked in the White House, there was an ET presence, right? That whole 8 years, he knew that. And what discussions took place? Did he ever consider it? All of this and so much other history, we may never see because the truth embargo buried everything. And unless people put stuff aside, we'll never know what went on. But the outcome was untold proxy wars, deaths of millions, genocides. Over $100 trillion was spent in nuclear, regular arms, reconstruction, and everything. $100 trillion has been spent since then. None of that money could feed, clothe, or house anybody, right? And so, or deal with earth problems or anything. $100 trillion thrown down the toilet so we wouldn't have a nuclear war, and allowed us to have these proxy wars. So we're talking about a nightmare scenario that might have been prevented if the truth had come out.
As we come into our last few minutes, it occurs to me that the concern about the world's future and the possibility that this administration may act on the subject, the agencies that are set up to do this are not noble philosophical think tanks. It's the Space Force and the military and the intelligence, and that idea of if you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail to you. We have no apparatus set to have a diplomatic base for contact as opposed to a militaristic one. And as we leave here, these are some of the most pressing issues that humanity will ever face. They will come up over the weekend. I think some of you already have a sense of Steve's talk, and he will be available.
No, I'm not going to talk like this. Trust me, I am not going to be like this in Exeter. I promise. It's going to be chill. It's going to be cool. Get some information. Then I'm going to have some light banner with the kids. It's going to be fun. I don't know why I'm in this frame of mind tonight. I did an interview earlier. Sometimes I just get there. I have to suppress this kind of stuff. Otherwise, it would just eat me alive. All right. But I'm an activist. It's what I do. Whereas a researcher, they don't have to think about that stuff. They just go look for stuff, right? Get that document. Oh, this came out. That thing happened. Oh, we didn't know about that. Write a book. Put it out. No big deal. Journalist, hey, interview people. Write up the article. Okay. But the activist is somebody who isn't just interested in maybe doing an article, doing research. They're interested in actually changing the world.
Yeah.
Can you imagine that? What insanity. And in order to do that, they have to identify the problem. And in order to identify the problem, they learn all the shit that's associated with that problem. And they get really worked up. You've seen it over this last 100 years in every major movement, right? Civil rights, anti-war, LGBTQ, whatever. It's always that way. And it's just why activists have a rough time, and they often end up badly.
And on that note, we have to say goodbye. This is Peter Robbins, speaking for Mike Stevens, Valerie Lofaso, Steve Bassett, and Martin Willis. Please join us, if at all possible, at the Exeter UFO Festival and Conference this weekend in beautiful Exeter, New Hampshire. Otherwise, stay well, stand up for what you believe in, and see you next week or this coming weekend. Over and out.
Namaste.